My name's Bryan John Johnson. Bryan John
What is your birthday?
Bryan.
No, what is your birthday?
On my birthday is the 12th of October, 1930.
So you are now
88 years old.
Wow. You look like 44. 44. Just
Yeah,
half.
Not so young on the inside.
But in your forehead, I don't find any wrinkle there.
No. My wife has beaten them out.
You are here with your wife. What's her name?
Her name is Margaret Ann, but she's called Ann.
Anne.
And we've been together 62 years and married 60.
You are an endangered species.
And we have 38 offspring, children, and so forth.
Very productive.
Indeed.
Yes. Where were you born?
I was born in Napier,
Oh, that's where.
just before the earthquake destroyed the town in 1931.
Oh. I'm headed to that Napier.
Nice place.
Yeah. So tell me about the family background when you were growing up, when you were a child, your parents and your siblings, how many siblings and so on.
I had an elder brother and a younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
And my father worked as a clerk in a shipping company in Ahuriri, Napier. And I went through a Catholic education system and left in 1945 and joined the New Zealand Navy in 1946
46.
at the age of 15.
And you joined the Navy, right?
Joined the New Zealand Navy, yes.
And at the age of 15, that was so young, wasn't it?
Well, it seemed an appropriate age at the time.
Really? These
My
days-
brother had served in the war, in the latter stages of the war, and was in Tokyo when the armistice was signed, or the surrender of Japan was signed in 1945. So I followed him into the Navy.
I see. And where did you get the basic military training?
We had the military training in an island called Motuihe Island in Auckland Harbour. And the ship was called the HMNZS Tamaki.
For how long?
We trained initially for 14 months before we went to sea.
14 months?
Yes.
That was very long.
And I served in Korea from April 1951 to April 1952.
So you served for a year?
Well, from the time we left New Zealand till the time we returned, yes.
And when you were in school and before you left for Korea, did you know anything about Korea?
Well, as a school teacher subsequently, no, never heard about it really.
You never heard about Korea?
Well, we knew that it had been occupied by Japan for a long time. So, no, we didn't know a great deal. It was never advertised.
I see. And nobody taught you from the school?
No.
No. So when did you leave for Korea? From where?
Left from Auckland in April 1951.
Yeah. And then from Auckland, where did you go?
We went from Auckland to Brisbane, and from Brisbane to Darwin, Darwin to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong to Yokosuka in Japan.
And what did you do in Japan?
We operated patrols from Kure and Sasebo to Korea to escort vessels taking supplies to the war and to patrol off the North Korean coast. And yeah.
Yeah. What kind of ship was it?
It was a frigate called the Hawea, which is not a very good picture here.
You brought some picture. Good.
I
Thank
brought
you.
some pictures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Show it to me.
Well, this was when we used to patrol off the North Korean coast on an island called Chodo,
Chodo, yes.
which is about 30 kilometers from Pyongyang and about 6 kilometers from the coast. And it was occupied by American forces, and we were there to see the North Vietnamese did not invade.
North Koreans.
North Koreans
Yeah.
did not invade because it was North Korean territory.
I see.
And we received on one occasion some people waving from the beach.
Oh,
And we took a motorcraft ashore to pick them up. And that was me with a Bren gun. I was
Oh.
the coxswain of the boat. And
what was the occasion again? Could you show that again and explain?
I was the coxswain, and I was in charge of the gun. And these were the people
Why? What happened there? Rescuing the refugee?
rescuing refugees, and those are the refugees that we brought from North Korea to Choda, or Cho, Do being island.
How did you encounter them? What was the occasion?
They waved from the shore
Sure, in North Korea?
in North Korea.
Yo.
We thought it might be a trap, but that's why we took the firearms.
I see.
And we picked them up from the beach and took them back and put them on a Korean naval vessel to be taken back to South Korea.
That's amazing. How many were there?
There were,
all
I
of them?
think, 6, a family.
6?
And they said they were Christians
Oh,
and they wanted to get out of North Korea.
I see. That's a very noble thing that you did.
Sorry?
That's a very good thing that you did.
Yes.
You saved their lives.
Yes, saved their freedom anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me about the frigate. What was the name of the frigate?
Hawea.
Could you spell it?
Hawea.
Okay.
There's a very... That is the island of Chodo
Yes.
that we used to patrol off. That's a sketch that I did at the time. And that's the sort of winter gear that we used to dress in
Yes.
when on watch.
Yeah.
And this is the ship's company,
Yes.
taken in Hong Kong.
Hold on. Oh, hold on. Put it back. Yes. So these are the soldiers that you work with together?
Sailors.
Okay. In the frigate? Is this frigate?
No,
Okay.
no, that's a previous ship that I
Okay.
was on. No, the frigate that we were in was smaller. I don't know that I have a picture. Oh, there. That's the type of ship, but it's very poor photography.
Thank you. So that's one of the frigate?
That was a frigate.
Okay.
That's the one that we patrolled in.
Oh, actually that was the one.
We'd spend about 22 to 28 days at sea, patrolling off the coast, escorting tankers and supply vessels, and protecting the offshore islands from the North Koreans. And then we'd go back into Sasebo or Kure
Ah.
and restore for 3 or 4 days and then go back on patrol.
Tell me about, were there any dangerous moment that you might have lost your life or big problems to your ship?
Well, some of the frigates got bombarded. We didn't. Our
Bombarded by whom?
from the shore
Oh,
by North Korean forces.
yes.
But our main concern was MiG fighters that used to patrol, and we thought we'd be attacked by them. In which case they would move very rapidly, 700 miles an hour, and they'd be out of gun range. So we looked upon them as the greatest threat to us, the Soviet MiGs operated by the North Koreans.
I see. So, but UN forces was dominant in the sea, right?
Yes, completely.
Completely.
We went as far north as the Han River, and on the east coast we went almost as far as Port Arthur or Vladivostok.
Oh, up that north?
I see your name is Han.
Yes.
We patrolled up the Han River.
Yes, that's
18
right.
miles up the Han River.
Yeah.
North Koreans on the northern bank, and us on the southern bank.
Was it Imjin River or Han River?
It was the Han.
Han.
Yeah.
And you were in Korea from 51 to 52.
Yeah.
Yes. So tell me about. So then you might see the Seoul city from the Han River. Did you?
Well, we could see Seoul. Well, Incheon, because Seoul is what, some distance. Yeah, because that's where the Incheon landings had taken place before we got up there.
Exactly.
And they had cut off the North Koreans and pushed them back to the Chinese border before the Chinese came into the war. So we used to operate sometimes out of there as one of our operations. But I never actually got ashore into Korea. But I did go to Korea in 2001.
2001.
With a group.
Yes. You were invited by the Korean government.
Yes, we were invited by the Korean Veterans Association.
Yeah, Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, yes.
That was the group.
Yes.
That toured in 2001, the 51st anniversary.
Gapyeong Battle, yes, 1951. So when you see Korea in 2001, how was it?
Well, I could only see it from shipboard. I never went ashore.
No, 2001.
Oh, 2001. They gave us a wonderful time. We were...
Tell me about the detail. What did you see? What was the program? Where did you go?
Oh, we went down to Busan, or Pusan, and we went to Incheon. Mm-hmm. We went to the Panmunjom and looked across the North Koreans, and we were treated extremely well by everybody, and have been subsequently. When I've met Korean people and they find out that I served in Korea, they're most gracious, most grateful to us, most generous to us. So I've only been back twice, staying overnight on a flight to Europe, back to Seoul.
So when you saw the Seoul in 2001, what city was like?
Well, it was quite an impressive city, what they had done, but it's changed, I think, dramatically since then. Yeah. Because it was almost totally destroyed by the North Vietnamese.
Yes.
North Koreans, I should say, not North.
Right.
North Koreans.
And tell me about the soft side of your service. What was it like to live in a frigate? Where did you sleep? What did you eat? What was it like? What did you do there?
It was very rough living because the frigates were built in 1942 for service in the convoys to Russia, supporting the supply vessels around the north of Norway and Finland to Russia. They were very basic vessels. They had very little heating and very little room. We slept in hammocks and were very crowded conditions. Food was very bad, and because of the cooking arrangements. on one occasion, they served us up fish that had been frozen in 1941. And they brought it out and served it up to us. So the food conditions were bad, and
it's a resurrection of that fish.
We were not provided with good battle equipment. I was captain of the 4-inch gun in command of.
So you were gunnery?
I was a quartermaster, but I was captain of the gun. We only had one 4-inch gun, and I was the captain of that. And instead of anti-flash gear, all we had for our ears was cotton wool. Just put in a bit of cotton wool, and that protected you from the blast. So that's why I'm deaf.
What does the quartermaster do?
Quartermaster is responsible for manning the gangway in harbour and steering the ship at sea.
Oh, you steer the ship?
Steering the ship, yes, a quartermaster.
That's pretty good.
He's in charge of the wheelhouse and the steering of the ship.
Did you learn that before you joined the Navy, or?
Oh, well, I trained for that later.
I
yes.
see.
Yeah.
And at the time, you were not married. Did you have a girlfriend?
Not permanently.
Not permanently.
No.
Just many.
Well, you spend a lot of time at sea. You didn't really get to meet a great number of girls.
So where did you and when did you meet your wife?
I left the Navy in 1954, went to Teachers College,
Oh.
a residential teachers college called Ardmore in New Zealand. And that was in 1955. And in 1956, I met Anne in her second night at Ardmore at a dance.
I see. And you've been with her since then?
Virtually, yes.
So tell me more about your service as a Navy. Where were you? Mostly in the West Sea, right? Yellow Sea.
Well, yeah, mostly. Some in the Sea of Japan, and we did some patrols. The American...
We call it East Sea, not Sea of Japan.
The East Sea. The Americans patrolled the East Coast, and the British forces, or Commonwealth forces,
in the
controlled the West Coast. But we went on an American patrol up the East Coast. On
together?
One occasion. Yeah.
What was it like to work with the American Navy?
Well, the American Navy had the Army there, and they weren't very friendly with each other. Because...
With the British? You mean?
The British were. And with Australians and New Zealanders, if we went to a bar and an Australian was there, we'd have a...
Fight?
Yeah, but a friendly fight.
Okay.
We'd abuse them, and the Americans and the Brits would think we were going to come to blows, but we wouldn't. We might, if he was one guy, we might strip off his medals and so forth. But we were great friends with those, and we got on well with the Dutch, who were also in Korea. Didn't have a great deal to do with the Americans, but the problem with the Americans was the division between the Army and the Navy, each fighting for the biggest budget, and the one that had the collected or appeared to be doing the best, they got the bigger budget. So there was a certain degree of antipathy between the Army. We picked up an Army patrol craft one time, brought it alongside, cooked them a meal, baked them some, invited them aboard, and they were quite surprised because they said our own Navy would not do that for us. Because there was this,
Any special episode that you remember during your service in the frigate that you want to share with us?
Well, we had a bombardment. We were on the East Coast, patrolling with American forces, and an American ship had hit a train. The rubber line supplying the south, supplying the North Koreans to the south, that had to run along the coast. And so it was open to bombardment from sea. They'd have a series of tunnels, and the trains would stoke up and rash across from one tunnel to the next. Now, an American ship had caught one of these, stopped one of these trains, and we were sent in to destroy it. And I was captain of the gun. And what you did normally, you illuminated the target by firing off star shells, 3 star shells. And then you bombarded. So I said, stand by to illuminate. They did that. And then I said, stand by to bombard. Unfortunately, the gunnery instructor had changed the ammunition from one locker to the other, so that where the star shell was the high explosive. So when we loaded to fire off high explosive shells, all that went off were the star shells. And Americans said, very good elimination. Pity you didn't get a shot away. And the gunnery officer aboard, he was very irate. And I said, well, sir. So I went down and got a pot of white paint and got my tin hat and painted Star Shell Johnson because I knew that I'd get rubbished by the rest of the crew, so I got in first. So I was known as Star Shell Johnson.
What a memory that is. Any other episode?
Oh, we had some very interesting characters. We had one character, because we lost our motorboat, it got sunk in the Han River at night time in the dark.
Small motorboat.
Yeah, a small motorboat, about 26 foot. And it got tipped over and sunk. And the 2 ratings, a petty officer and a naval seaman, were swept away into the dark. Now, we couldn't light up because the North Korean shore was only a couple of 100 meters away. So a crew from the English frigate Amethyst, HMS Amethyst, they eventually picked up these chaps after they'd been in the water for about 6 hours. The Amethyst was famous because it was up the Yangtze River and it had to escape down to the sea. And a film was made about the escape of the Amethyst right through all the Chinese Communist forces.
I think it must have been Imjin River rather than Han River, right?
No, the Han.
No, I think it's Imjin River. Anyway.
What is the river that goes in at Incheon?
That goes, Incheon, that's the Han River, but at the same time, Imjin River goes to Incheon too.
Well, it was the Han River that we patrolled.
Got it. So they survived, right?
They survived, yes.
Good.
And when they got back aboard, the officer of the watch, instead of offering them a rum to warm them up, offered them a cup of cocoa. Yes.
So when you went back to Korea 2001, you saw marvelous change in Korea.
Oh, indeed, yes. But I hadn't been ashore previously, so I didn't have much to compare it with. But we went to a ceremony in Busan that was conducted by Prince Harry, one of the royal family.
From British.
Yeah. And there were American, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand forces there, North Korean, and I think a couple of South American countries. And they had quite a big ceremony in Busan. We flew down from Seoul.
Were you proud to be presented as Korean War veteran there?
Well, we were just, that's what we had joined the Navy for, to defend our country. So it was just a job. There's no great heroism about it. It was long hours at sea. You worked for 80 to 90 hours a week because you were either on watch or you were looking after the ship, cleaning up, so forth. So it was fairly uncomfortable, but it was what we knew.
What about Korean War known as Forgotten War? Why is it? Why Korean War has been known as Forgotten War?
Wyatt, well, the thing that concerned us was the fact, on one occasion, the people on Cho, some of them thought they'd make some extra money by smuggling rice that they'd grown on Cho, taking it and selling it in North Korea. They didn't know what radar was. They didn't realize that in black of night that they'd be picked up. And we had a couple, father and son, picked up, and their small junk brought alongside, and we were to watch, to guard them until the North Korean, at least the South Korean, patrol craft took them away. And we knew when they were taken away, they wouldn't come back. They'd be taken out to sea. So we spent an hour trying to encourage them to go over the side and swim for shore. We couldn't explain it to them. And in the morning, they were taken away. The boy was probably 12 or 13 with his father. But because we couldn't speak the language and they didn't trust what we were saying, they were taken out and didn't come home.
But still, we haven't signed the peace treaty yet. We are technically at war, and Kim Jong-un and Trump, they are talking about ending the war and do better things for the Korean reunification. What do you think about that?
I think it's good publicity. It's good for the media, but I don't trust the media because they'll only tell stories that they think are interesting and they won't necessarily tell the truth. I haven't got much time for the media either in New Zealand or worldwide. The media, what we get to hear is what they want us to hear, not what may be the truth.
Very critical. Yes.
And that's why in New Zealand, Trump gets bad publicity all the time. But there are some who see him as being more successful to America, for some certain Americans, than Clinton was and Obama. They see him solving a few of the problems they needed solving, but he gets bad publicity.
In your opinion, what is the importance of the Korean War in world history?
It was the first time that the United Nations had joined together to repel an aggressor. And that was only because Khrushchev, I think it was, had left the meeting.
Stalin.
No, not Stalin. Stalin was the leader, but
Khrushchev was far later. And
I'm sorry, no. At the United Nations.
Yes. The Soviet Union representative was absent there.
Was Khrushchev, I think, because he took up his shoe and he hit the table and he left before they could vote to take part. Otherwise, Russia would have put an embargo on it and the United Nations would not have been able to contribute. So it was the first time the United Nations tried to protect the freedom of a member country. I don't think they've done as well since.
So that's the first thing that you can think of as an important aspect of the Korean War. What else?
No, that's the main thing that occurs to me. The fact that it has never been concluded is also a bit of a worry. and the fact that in many cases the United Nations forces didn't get the best publicity, but that happens.
Do you know that New Zealand World History class talk about Korean War?
When I was teaching, it was never on the history.
What did you teach?
I taught basically general subjects, and at secondary level, from the age of 7-year-olds to the pre-university.
Oh.
I taught through at a secondary co-educational school. I taught art and craft, but I also taught English and basic mathematics and social studies. And
wow. Did you talk about Korean War?
never mentioned the Korean
You
War.
never mentioned?
No, it was never mentioned.
That's the war that you fought for. Why didn't you mention?
Oh, no. When I came home in the Navy,
Yeah.
I was invited by one of the teachers of the school I'd gone through to come and talk to the kids about the Korean War. But I attended one or two Korean veterans, but mostly the Korean veterans were Army. The New Zealand Navy had the crews of 6 frigates that served up there, but most of the Korean veterans were Army types.
But when you were a teacher, you didn't talk about the war that you fought for?
No.
Oh, why?
Well, it wasn't on the teaching curriculum. I mean, there were so many other things
Exactly.
happening in the world. I suppose in general we may have, we never got round, we didn't have the amount of publicity that you're getting these days with television and all the rest of those aids. So
You made a good point because there was no Korean War in the curriculum so that you couldn't teach about it, right?
well,
You
it
couldn't
was,
spend too much time on it.
well, it wasn't considered. It was only a brief period of time and a small number of New Zealanders involved. So it was not really mentioned, as had the First and Second World Wars been. And then the Vietnamese War got very bad press because the peace people seeking so-called peace.
Could you look at this book and read the title for us? What is it? What is the title of that book?
Korea's place in teaching world history.
Yeah, could you show
World
that?
History Digital Education Foundation.
Could you show that? Right. That's the book my foundation published in the United States. And it's not about the war, it's about the Korean government's role in rapid economic development and digital technology in Korean society. And it is to teach about the successful outcome out of the Korean War. Teachers didn't know much about it, so that's why we made this lesson plan modules and primary and secondary resources so that teachers can teach about it.
Yeah. Yes, well, it's a fairly important aspect, but if it's money or history, then money is going to win out every time.
Yeah. Right. So that's what we are trying to do here in New Zealand, making this interview into curricular resources so that teachers here in New Zealand can talk about the Korea and the Korean War. What do you think?
I don't think it'll ever get into a syllabus in New Zealand.
You will see what will be the differences that my foundation can
I
make.
think that the education system in New Zealand is not objective. It is controlled by certain forces, ethnic forces,
I see.
and history seems to be sadly lacking at times.
Yeah. It's everywhere that history is not major.
I know presently in the United States,
Yes.
in the universities, there is a strong swing to the left, extreme left, and a lot of universities are unable to operate freely, freedom of speech, because there is a growing number of students who, thinking that they are doing right by talking about transsexuals and race and so forth, get very offended if anybody passes a comment that they consider unfair.
But still, racial discrimination is the thing that we need to avoid, right?
But the point is, most of the claims they make many of the claims they make are not happening today. They go back 100 years or 200 years. You have the United Nations now, which is controlled by the small countries that had been colonized. And because they've got equal vote with the larger countries, England's got one vote and Chad or some place like that. Because they're pre-colonial powers, now they're trying to get their own back. So that European countries are getting very bad press. And white people, if you're an old white man, they consider you past your prime. They have a saying for me in New Zealand, in the media, pale, frail, and stale.
Yeah. So by next year, 2020, it's going to be the 70th anniversary of the Korean War. Is there any special message to the Korean people from your heart?
Look after your freedom. You have your freedoms in South Korea challenged by many politicians who have been corrupted in their office in the past. So much so that some of your leaders have had to be brought before the court. So treasure freedom of speech and the individual's right to express himself. Whether he is white, black, whatever his sexuality, whatever his race, whatever his political feelings are, treat him with respect and listen to him.
Yes, great message. What about to the world about the war that you fought for? It has not been replaced by the peace treaty, and a lot going on in the Korean Peninsula. What would you say to the world about the Korean War?
No, I haven't really considered. I haven't considered. I couldn't give advice without considering it for longer than that.
Right. What is your advice?
I think that for the good of the health, the freedom of the people of North Korea have to be taken away from the present indoctrination that they have from Kim Il-jong. And they need to be freed. They need the money to go to feeding them, not to providing weapons against the West.
Very important, yes.
And I think the uniting of the Koreas is very important.